Hello everybody and welcome back to the West Ham Network. This is your live OPPO preview for the game against Crystal Palace. Another thrilling London derby at the London Stadium. Thrilling indeed, but not necessarily because of everything we're doing on the pitch, because there's nothing happening on the pitch at West Ham and pressure is definitely continuing for Graham Potter. Rumours today kicking about that Slaven Bilic could be coming back to West Ham. And according to sources close to the Slaven Bilic, there is an element of truth in that. Yes, you have heard it here first. There is an element of truth around that one. But hey-ho, we live in this rollercoaster ride that is supporting West Ham. Anyway, there's no point in me coming on here and talking to you about Crystal Palace. We'd be as well bringing on a Crystal Palace fan. But this isn't just, for me, genuinely not a kind of any normal Crystal Palace fan. This is a well-known social media account, HLTCO. Dan, you'll all know, really reads into the game, in my opinion, my humble opinion, well. And talks about his love for Crystal Palace, and then of course talks a lot about all other football. So I'm going to bring you in. Dan, thank you very much for joining us, mate. How you doing? You well?
I'm good, mate. You?
Yeah, really good, mate. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to come on to the show, because there's loads of reasons why we'd want to get you on, but really, like, we've got a little kind of WhatsApp group amongst the group of people that help run the channel and just generic West Ham fans. And there's a lot of your tweets kind of get posted in the group quite a lot, and it's all about really just how we all value your opinion, because you see it as it is, because you, even though you're a Crystal Palace fan and you love and live and breathe your team, you see it and you resonate with the fans.
Well, I like to think so. It's not something that, I say it's not something I actively try to do. Obviously it is. I sort of rally against that clickbaity way of the world when it comes to sort of modern fan media. I never want to be someone that's going in on a YouTube video or on a podcast like this and shouting into the screen. Obviously, emotion has a place, but I like to think that football fans, as a collective, we all have the tribalism, we have the backwards and forwards. But at our core, especially match-going fans, and I don't want to be snobbish about it, but there is a degree of sympathy, of understanding, of empathy of what other fan bases are going through. So if it's West Ham, if it's Sheffield Wednesday, if it's, even a top six club, I don't feel as though it's just a linear thing of, well, you can't be miserable because you're fourth. There are reasons why Spurs fans, for example, couldn't stand Daniel Levy, and there's very legitimate reasons as far as I'm concerned why you have every reason to be pissed off, angry with the direction of travel at West Ham. And, you've won a European trophy recently, but it doesn't mean the be-all and end-all. And I think often, from my point of view, it gets reduced to, well, you chase David Moyes out of the club, you've got a new stadium, you've won this trophy, what more do you expect? You're West Ham. But it's about the direction of travel, and that quite clearly is going nowhere at the moment. So I do feel that there is a degree of sympathy there that should be shouted from the rooftops by football fans all over, because it can be your club, like, easily enough. If you're going through a particularly good time at the moment and want to poke fun at West Ham, all well and good, but you can't really expect it to come the other way unless you're the one out there saying, look at this, peel away a few layers and see why they're actually annoyed. Yeah, and
it's so true what you say. And again, it's so refreshing to hear it come from someone who, you don't live and breathe our club, you live and breathe your club, but you've got a genuine interest in football. If anyone who follows you on social media, like, you talk a lot about how you love Crystal Palace, but you love football. Like, that's one of your things. So you've got a keen interest in it, but you see it for face value as it is. And it's funny how you kind of mentioned West Ham in the same kind of breath as Sheffield Wednesday and clubs in potential elements of turmoil. And we all know Sheffield Wednesday are in the element of turmoil that they're in. But maybe people look at West Ham from the outsider point of view and see us winning the Europa Conference League and see us in the stadium that we're in and think, what are you moaning at? Like, why are you moaning as a club? But without really seeing the backstory, hearing the backstory and understanding the levels of where we've come from and how we've got to where we've got to and then as West Ham fans looking at Crystal Palace and seeing some of the recent success and some of the infrastructure that's been built. Listen, I know as a Crystal Palace fan, you've had a lot of turmoil over the years as well. I'm not denying that. Yeah, fair share of it. But, and coming on to that, just because we're here to talk about that as well. We'll come on to West Ham in a minute. But in terms of Crystal Palace, couple of successful seasons under your big boss man. I mean, talk to me about Glasner.
He's incredible, mate. It's weird. I'd sort of made my peace with Palace never winning anything. I'm 36, and I think every year that passes, it becomes more and more difficult for those fairy tale stories. Like I think back to Chesterfield getting to an FA Cup semi when I was a kid. I think they played Middlesbrough, and I remember it being on terrestrial TV and thinking, like, this is great. But obviously, you have the Leicester title in 2015 or 16, but if you look at PSR and you look at the way that football is structured at the upper echelons of the game now, it's like they add sort of rungs to the ladder every single year to make it more and more difficult for upstarts like Blackburn Rovers, for example, or Chelsea when Roman Abramovich first came in to actually do what they did, because they want the established powers to remain the established powers. So from a Palace fan's point of view, I'd sort of thought to myself, well, we sit there in the middle part of the Premier League and we're never going to be top four, because even if we do get into Europe, the squad will get picked apart. And that has been proven in some senses over the last couple of years, because Elise's moved on, Eze's moved on. Liverpool did their best to get Mark Gay at the end of this window. I appreciate that didn't end up happening for reasons that we won't go into now. But winning the FA Cup and doing it in the fashion that we did was such a ridiculous bolt from the blue, because you had a manager prior to Oliver Glasner in Roy Hodgson, who was the definition of stability. He actually didn't really like cup competitions because it was all about getting the points on the board to stay in the Premier League, keep the money train rolling, and not doing the bare minimum, but it was almost an inconvenience to have this winner-takes-all game of football. Oliver Glasner came in and went, no, we'll win it, we'll do it, we'll go. And we took on Fulham in the quarterfinals, Aston Villa in the semis, and then Man City in the final, of course. And, to put in the performances we did against 3 Premier League sides, the latter 2 being Champions League teams, and we played Villa off the park. Like, everyone will talk about the final against City for obvious reasons. That semi-final against Aston Villa was a joke. Like, there wasn't a single Villa fan who would have denied that we deserved it fully. And watching your team turn up in those big games and doing it in such an authentic way, it was just fantastic. And, it's something that will live with me for the rest of my life.
And I think the similarity between your story there and my story and West Ham fan story is the Europa Conference League journey, the Europa League journey, the 3 seasons in Europe, and how we, sometimes turning over teams like Lyon in the style that we did, again, always live in the memory for someone my age group who's never really been part of a successful West Ham team, but now seeing it in our age. But, you mentioned several players there, and this is about, interestingly, and I'm keen to hear your point of view there. You talk about Guéhi, who didn't obviously leave at the end of the summer there. You can maybe draw on that a little bit, but you mentioned Elise, you mentioned Eze. Do you think you got bang for your buck? You've brought a player in for the amount of money you brought them in. You've sold them for profits. I don't think many fans would be necessarily massively happy that the player has gone, a good player's gone. West Ham have been stung by that in the past. Rio Ferdinand sold them for £18 million to Leeds United, replaced them with Rigobert Song, Titi Camara. It does not work all the time, but do you think that first and foremost you've got bang for your buck, and have you recruited well on the back of that with the way that the current market is?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, I think I'm realistic, and most Palace fans are realistic about our place within the footballing food chain. An Adam Walton or a Bire Eze or a Michael Elise are not signing for Crystal Palace to be here for the rest of their careers. They're signing to grow, hopefully help the club grow alongside them, and have mutual success that then leads to them getting big moves and us. I mean, if you look at a Bire Eze as a prime example, signed, played full 5 years, as far as I'm aware, 2020 to 2025, got into the England squad, was an established Premier League star, won the FA Cup, left for Arsenal, £67.5 million. We bought him for 16. You can't really argue with that. Michael Elise came in for 8. We sold him for 50 because of a release clause. If it wasn't for the release clause, we could have sold him for a lot more. Yeah. And Mark Gay's situation is slightly different because his contract's running down, but we've taken the sort of financial decision to have that hit. But, I look at it and I think in terms of recruitment, we can say to any potential up-and-coming star, Look what Michael Olise's done. Look what Mark Gay's about to do. Look what Abir Eze's done. And you see it with, all sorts of players that we bring in. This summer we brought in Yeremy Pino from Villarreal. If he hadn't had an ACL a couple of years ago, he'd probably be playing for Barcelona by now. So it's a case of us being that team that can be the sort of the lily pad to jump on. And it's not a particularly romantic thing to say, but until you do establish yourselves as a top 6 or a top 4 side every single year, you can't keep hold of these players. And if you're not Real Madrid and Barcelona, then there is always someone bigger, as Liverpool about with Trent Alexander-Arnold this summer.
So then, in terms of a West Ham fan looking in, are Crystal Palace fans quite contented in where they're at in terms of the way that's ran, in terms of the manager, in terms of the playing, the transfer market? Are you quite a contented fan, Dan?
It depends. It depends. So Glasner's got the rest of his season to run on his deal, and we've been trying to get him to sign a new contract. It hasn't happened. So I don't necessarily blame him. His managerial stock is up here. Prior to being Palace manager, he was in charge of a club called Lask. He got them 4th, I think, in their domestic division. Went to Wolfsburg, got them in the Champions League. Went to Eintracht Frankfurt, won the Europa League, qualified them for the Champions League. Was out of work, came to Crystal Palace and won us our first ever trophy. So there is no hole on the man's CV. As and when his contract expires, he will have top jobs all over the place. I've said it all summer, and I appreciate it's not a particularly realistic scenario right now, but if Mikel Arteta was to completely fall away and Arsenal finish 5th, then Oliver Glasner would be one of the prime candidates to take over. So again, it's like the player conversation. We are aware of our place within football's hierarchy. There is this looming presence of having to replace our greatest ever manager, given the fact that he's the only one to win a major trophy, and our captain in a single summer without any money for either one of them, which is a particularly stiff challenge. But given the fact that we're in Europe for the first time ever, and given the fact that we're currently on a 16-game unbeaten run in all competitions, we can't really look beyond this weekend or the next month. We're very much riding the wave at the moment and well aware that it's going to come crashing down soon, but trying to get every single drop of enjoyment out of it. And I think sometimes it's nice as a football fan to just live in that moment if you can.
100%, mate. 100%. I know that now because we're seeing it from the other side of the point of view, and it's awful. It's never really gone away as West Ham fans. I think what our success papered over a lot of cracks. And again, with the Nottingham Forest victory that West Ham had, our only victory this season, the last 10 minutes papered over the cracks of what West Ham actually look like we're going to be this season. But you brought me nicely onto Crystal Palace's kind of run. Was it 16 games without seeking defeat? I think the last time, was it April? Was it April last year, your last defeat?
Yeah, we lost to Newcastle 5-0 at St James's. But it was one of those games where we fully got it out of our system. And, from then, it's weird because we played Millwall on Tuesday. We were rubbish. But, we've conceded a 91st minute equaliser and still won the shootout. And I had this conversation on another pod I do this morning. People say you want to play well. You do, obviously. In an ideal situation, you play superbly and win every week. But if you play really well and get done 1-0, you just spend the entire week afterwards cursing the fact that you don't take your chances. You'd far rather not play particularly well and still come out victorious. So we are very much in that phase at the moment. We haven't been bad this season, but it hasn't quite clicked in the way that we want it to. But to be unbeaten, going into late September is quite remarkable, really.
100%. There's loads of comments coming in. So if you are watching, this is live, so keep your comments coming in. But just one I want to bring up here is from Double A Bell. Dan is one of the most insightful, balanced commentators on football across the board, not just Palace. Voices like his add so much weight to our argument. Huge respect from this hammer. So keep the comments coming in. Loads of people are actually saying here, sorry, we'll come on to that one in a second. I'm so jealous of Palace at the moment. They've achieved so much in a season. That's from Kieran, a good old friend on our channel here as well. But you definitely feel like you are riding that wave, and you've had a game midweek. West Ham didn't have the game midweek. I'm not saying that's going to stand West Ham in any form of stead in terms of coming up against Palace this weekend, because I'd absolutely 100% rather be in a cup competition and see West Ham go through a cup run. And I think the thing you've mentioned there is you didn't play well, but you got the job done, and I feel like that's sometimes where West Ham's intent lacks, is getting that job done. We can never see something through. It's been like that for a long time at West Ham, actually, and it's a very frustrating moment and sometimes just trying to see out. And I think maybe we had that element of that under Moyes. Coming to the latter end of time with Moyes, it wasn't there as such, hence the reason for people looking for a change there. But in terms of Crystal Palace, we're going to come on to a bit of team news in a second, but your mindset coming to the London Stadium, I'm intrigued to hear what your point of view is as an opposition fan. First and foremost, what do you think the fans' opinion is of the London Stadium? And then secondly, do you think Crystal Palace and other teams look at West Ham, look at the vulnerability, especially at home, the fact that we concede a lot of goals at home, and say, this is our chance to not just win, but open up a bit of our goal difference quite well?
I mean, potentially, your pride comes before a fall, doesn't it? It's a Premier League game of football, and you've got quality players. Mateta and Bowen. It's not as though you're a complete shambles in every single sense. I understand at the moment West Ham fans are frustrated, and understandably. I mean, from my point of view, the London Stadium is a huge factor because I went to Upton Park many times. I said to you before the live started, my oldest childhood friend is a West Ham fan. His dad's a West Ham fan. When Palace weren't at home, they had a spare season ticket. I used to go to Upton Park a lot. I actually went a lot in the season when you were relegated, when you had Glenn Johnson playing, and he just broken through. And don't get me wrong, Selhurst and Upton Park, different places. They're different in terms of the atmosphere and the feel of the whole place. But you undeniably lost something, and it's something intangible that can't be captured. And when you go from somewhere like that, and I mean, Spurs could say the same about White Hart Lane and their new stadium, but the difference is their new stadium feels like a home. Yeah. It feels like a new home that needs a bit of living in, but it feels like a home. That just feels like a warehouse. It's not a football stadium. I'm going there on Saturday. I'm actually taking my little boy, who's 6.5, to his first ever away game on Saturday because it's
good choice.
And it wasn't really because I wasn't thinking, well, we'll beat them.
I know.
It's locals. But even the away end being in two sections, it's rubbish. You can't even really get atmosphere going because it doesn't feel like you're in the same bit. And if you're having to go there every week and you're sitting around faces that you don't recognise because it changes, and the cost of getting there is a lot, and it's horrible to get in and out of, and you don't feel connected to the stadium, then by definition, it won't make for a pleasant experience and it won't make for a good atmosphere. It's not that the atmosphere can't be created in there. I remember watching Colombia play at friendly because Daniel Munoz, the Palace right back, scored in that game, and there was like mad noise. So it's not
crazy.
It can't be done. And I'm sure you've had European nights where it's been unbelievable.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Seville.
The general feel is that it's too cavernous. It's too big. It's too vacant of sort of memories and traditions. And that is something that you need to cultivate from the ball down, not from the fans up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very simplistic thing. I was watching your game the other day, and obviously Spurs are 3-0 up or whatever it was, and the ground's pretty much empty. And my missus, who goes and is a football person now, but only because of me in the last 6 or 7 years, she said to me, "Is that West Ham's ground?" I said, "Yeah." She went, "Why are all the seats white?" And I think it's such a simplistic way of boiling down why it's a mess. Because I know they've got those claret and blue triangles, but you're playing Spurs and all the seats are white. I know, and then it's ridiculous. But they should be claret and blue.
You've brought up a point I've always kind of made, because I think, listen, what's happening at West Ham right now is there's no like comparison to what I'm about to say, but I've travelled a lot with West Ham away fans. I've gone to Anfield and I've seen, when you're there in person, it's easier to see there are blatantly empty seats and sections of empty seats, the same at Old Trafford, but you can't see them from the vision of the telly because they're red and they're blending in with the colour of the strips that everyone's wearing. Whereas when it is West Ham, it's clear as day when there's empty seats, even one empty seat, because it's clearly white in the middle of people wearing claret blue or whatever colour clothing they are, because you're never going to have someone turn up with just a full white outfit on, really, to be honest with you. And that's 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 like turning up to Wimbledon, isn't it, really? But yeah, it really is a kind of scary moment, and hearing, do you think Glasner and Crystal Palace they've got to have to come into this game with a confidence? Like, I don't think West Ham feel confident. I don't think the manager feels confident. I don't think the players feel confident. The fans don't feel confident. But Crystal Palace probably do.
It's not a must win. But as soon as managers start talking in those terms, you sort of know. As soon as the manager says it's not a must win, it's as close to a must win as it. Because managers aren't going to say that. They're almost signing their own death warrant by saying that. So, I don't know. With us, the solidarity that we've had across these 16 games and pretty much throughout Oliver Glasner's time has been the back five. And for me, obviously, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But I feel as though Chris Richards, Mark Gay, Maxence Lacroix is up there with the best back threes in the Prem, not just outside the top six, but in the Prem. Tariq Mitchell is an incredibly dependable left back who defensively is very solid. Daniel Munoz, I think, has one of the best engines in the Prem. He just doesn't ever take a day off. He's always running. And Dean Henderson is a fantastic goalkeeper. So when you've got that, and the back five is settled and everyone knows their jobs and everyone defends set pieces properly, and you've got Mark Gay, who is an absolute Rolls Royce, who is the captain, who is the leader, it sets the tone for the rest of the team. And that is something that West Ham, from my point of view, are just lacking in every single sense, because you don't have that solidarity. So it means we go into games like this on Saturday, not expecting to win, but knowing that if we do our jobs and we stick to the plan that has been set out rigidly by Oliver Glasner, we can. And that breeds confidence in and of itself.
And I think as a West Ham fan looking at the Crystal Palace squad, I've brought it up here just now while you were talking, because you've got players throughout the squad, you've got strength and depth looking at it from an outsider point of view, but I want to bring up a kind of random player, but there's a place for him in the squad. It's like Will Hughes, for example. Lots of people probably, maybe even the last couple of years, if West Ham were even remotely linked to him, people would have been all over that, going, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Yeah, but what is it about what? Not just like what Glasner. How does Glasner manage a player like Will Hughes in terms of, coming from wherever he's come from to progress in his career that he has under Crystal Palace?
Well, look, you can look at all sorts of players across the squad. Justin Devaney's another one. We picked Justin Devaney up from Airdrie. I mean, I have no idea what was going on there, because he's come in and it's very difficult to know if it's them, if it's Glasner, or if it's a mixture of both. Almost certainly it's the latter. He gives such clear instructions of what he wants, and everyone knows their role. It's why he talks all the time about wanting players in early in the window. It sounds like a cliche sort of soundbite that a manager would say, just go and get their business done early, and he doesn't have to sort of dig out the board. But I think in terms of his coaching, there are patterns and there are specific things that he expects. So we had Ben Chilwell on loan from Chelsea. Ben Chilwell was a Champions League defender. Whether or not you rate him is by the by. His first game for us was against Doncaster in the FA Cup away from home. So by definition, Ben Chilwell can get through that game without any coaching whatsoever. He didn't pick a man up on a set piece after 2 minutes, and Glasner was like digging him out, big time. And then in the post-match interview, he went, "I've got to have a word with Ben because he did something in the transition that we don't do."
But it's that transparency is huge, though, isn't it? If he wants to play for
Crystal Palace, he can't do that. If he wants to play for this team, he's got to do that differently. And he got better. But this is my point. He doesn't respect reputations. Everyone has to work for the team. Everyone has to work in the framework. And if you don't, you're out. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I think that's really refreshing to hear, especially from a fan's point of view, because I think it's the same for every club, right? But at West Ham, we always talk about, we bring on the ex-players that play for West Ham, and they always come on and they tell any new player that they speak to that as long as you turn up and you fight for that badge, you'll get the West Ham fans on your side. But there's been many a time we're talking about one player in particular, and I hate to call out one player, but it's topical. It's worthy of bringing up, because James Ward-Prowse at West Ham's not having a great time just now. But every single game he has been rewarded by starting, and West Ham, not just West Ham, but mainstream media are picking up on the fact that he's becoming a kind of bit of a problem in the midfield, and because we're sticking with him and we've got no pace there. Of course, he's a set piece specialist, but we don't have a set piece coach in the club, so we're not utilising him to the best of his ability anyway. And we're sticking with players like that. And that's the kind of, I'm not necessarily saying Will Hughes and James Ward-Prowse are the sort of similarity, but in terms of the flat element, possibly.
Yeah, but I think you've got to bear in mind though, like with Will Hughes, he does all the simple things to 9 out of 10. every single week. And every fan knows this. There are players in your team that if you were talking to a Chelsea fan or an Arsenal fan down the pub, they wouldn't think of that individual as being important to the balance of your side. But you know, because you watch and you live and breathe every kick. And every team has them, every single one. And Will Hughes is that for us. He's a facilitator. He's fantastic at what he does, but you don't necessarily notice him. You know, it's basically like Claude Makelele was the god of that, to the point where everyone realised what Claude Makelele was doing. But everyone's got a mini Claude Makelele if their team is functioning properly. And Will Hughes is basically that for us. Without him, Adam Wharton wouldn't look as good as Adam Wharton does.
I was just about to bring him up, though. I mean, the kind of rise of his performances and talk to me about him, mate, and you know how he's kind of risen in the Crystal Palace stock.
Well, look, I mean, for me, obviously, there's a huge role that's been played here by Blackburn. I'm never going to be the sort of guy that comes on and speaks about Michael Elise without mentioning Reading or Birieze without mentioning QPR. Adam Wharton, the same thing. You know, at Blackburn, they all told us, as soon as we signed him, they said, you have no idea how good this lad is. Once you've watched him, you will realise. But truly, he is incredible. I've never, you know, like Busquets plays or used to play, and he'd see things 3 moves before they happen. It's the same with Adam Wharton. You can't teach it. He plays one-touch passes straight away that are perfectly weighted, perfectly placed. He's spotting runs. He's playing give and goes. He's constantly got his head on a swivel. He's unbelievable. And my only concern for him at the moment is the injuries, because he keeps on picking up little issues that will keep him out for 3 weeks here, 6 weeks here. And obviously, at a young age, if that keeps on happening, it can hamper your progress massively, and you can become one of those players that doesn't trust their body. When he picked up an injury against Aston Villa prior to the international break, typical one where no one touched him. He just went down with his groin thing. He's hopefully back in contention for minutes against yourselves. I don't know if it will be from the start. I mean, he wasn't involved on Tuesday against Millwall, so I doubt it. But we do have to manage his minutes quite carefully, because obviously European football this season and everything else. But if he's playing at his full level, then for me, he's a guaranteed member of the squad with England in the World Cup coming, because he does something no one else can do in the England squad. And that's me being rose-tinted. It's just a fact.
I love the give and go, though. I love that give and go element. Like, he gives the ball and he's gone. Like, by the time the ball's passed, you said he's thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of everyone else.
Moving.
Yeah, just his movement's just
he's all over the place. It's unbelievable to watch. And we're so much better with him, and you don't really realise why until you're watching your team with him in. So when England fans see him play for England, they'll suddenly go, wow. Look, I'm not anti any other club. But there was this comparison that was going on between him and Kobbie Mainoo for about 3 months. And I used to regularly say, if Kobbie Mainoo played for Crystal Palace and Adam Wharton played for Man United, this would not be a discussion. Genuinely, he is so good. Yeah. He just needs time and minutes to be able to prove it.
Well, we had that under the Declan Rice era when he was at West Ham as well. You know, we always knew.
For Arsenal.
Yeah. Suddenly out of the blue, he's up there. I suppose the final player I want to talk to you about is a striker's hard to come by these days. But you've got Mateta. What's your kind of thoughts on him? You know, he's actually struggling a bit at the moment. To be fair, he's playing every minute. I don't know if you saw the miss he had 93 against Millwall on Tuesday. Yeah. Just knackered, I think. I mean, it was one of those. He's gone with his left foot. I don't know why. He looks off the pace. He looks off the pace because he's playing every minute. We don't have another striker technically to use. Eddie Nketiah's coming back into contention against yourselves, but again, it'll be off the bench. It won't be from the start. And even if it was, he's a very different profile striker. I mean, Oliver Glasner said post-match on Tuesday, I looked at the bench and we don't have anyone else to bring on up there. It's not necessarily true, because Uche's just signed from Getafe. Technically, he played as a false 9 for Bordeaux last season, and he got 7 or 8 goals, led the line quite well, and he's a similar physical sort of profile to Mateta. But I wouldn't necessarily be too worried if I was a West Ham fan, because I think he's running on fumes at the moment. He may well get a goal or two. He has it in him, but that sort of all action, you know, bullying defenders and holding men off, his first touch at the moment seems to be lacking. And I think he's not necessarily lacking confidence, but he's lacking that sort of physical prowess to be like, no, come on, let's have a go. And that's I'll be honest with you though, Dan, that's the fear right now that I have with a player like Mateta. That's the reason I brought him up, because with the way that West Ham are playing, we've conceded so many goals in a short space of time. We're breaking records all for the wrong reason. And it usually does mean that when a striker is struggling and or on form, the team you feel like you want to step up against right now, especially when you can get them at the jugular, is West Ham, and especially at home, because we don't feel confident at home. We don't have that fortress that we used to have at Upton Park. We've had elements in games and specific times in our last 10 years that have made the place feel like a fortress, but we don't have that consistency. And we're coming into this game on the potential back of protests, fans not going to be on their seats. It's a messy place. People are saying that could affect the team on the park, but I don't know what else
you can do
to not affect the team on the park, because it's affected.
You need. It's like lancing a boil. Like, there's pain, but it's necessary pain. You know, I get it, I do, and obviously potentially we're going to be the beneficiaries of that. I mean, I would suggest the way that we've struggled this season is because teams have started taking us seriously. So they sit deeper and they sort of soak up pressure. We saw it with Millwall on Tuesday. We saw it with Fredrikstad in the UEFA conference. We ended up beating them 1-0 in aggregate, and it was a sort of weird goal in the end because they sat deep, and we're struggling to break down low blocks because we don't normally have to do that. I'm not sure West Ham can come out at home in a game like this and sit in a low block against Crystal Palace, which obviously plays into our hands to a certain extent. And if you go behind and the atmosphere turns even more toxic, then we will just pick you off even more. It's a bit of a difficult thing to sort of work out, I guess. I mean, ironically, the best thing for you to do would be to be defensive and sit in, frustrate us, and potentially grab a goal, because then we've got to come out even more. But whether or not Graham Potter is prepared to do that, I don't know.
And I think that's what it comes down to, is having the balls to do certain things. The problem is, do we have the arsenal in our squad to be able to back that up? And that's my fear. You know, we've brought in Mads Hermansen. He's it's not just his size is the concern, it's his his lack of commanding ability as a goalkeeper. You know, we have a set piece and you put that ball into the box, he does come out and he flaps, and we used to call Flapiansky, but I've never seen a flappier goalkeeper right now than what we've got in our keeper. I hate calling out West Ham players, but
because he's new, is there not an element of like, he knows how toxic the ground is, he knows about the protest, he knows about the unrest, and he knows he's new and he's got to prove himself, and now that he hasn't in the early running, it's like a runaway train of I don't know. I mean, because you speak to Leicester fans, and a lot of them say it was great for them. So,
well, yeah. I mean, listen, I seen something posted the other day, or if it was today, and it was. I'm not saying I believe in his opinion, but you know, an ex-professional footballer, sometimes they've got their opinions backed up in a way. And Troy Deeney was saying about West Ham's. I don't agree with his point in saying you don't sing players who are from relegated clubs, because there's absolutely loads of evidence that that's the right thing to do. But he did bring up the fact that if you sign the relegated goalkeeper, then he's used to conceding goals and used to losing. And if you bring in a fullback on a free transfer like Walker Peters, then he's used to losing, he's used to conceding goals. He then brought up like Fernandez as the example, which I didn't necessarily agree with. I don't actually agree with the Walker Peters point of view, but you know, when the mentality is that we're going to shop in that area, I kind of get his point a little bit. But Hermansen has been used to conceding goals, and he does look like a really good shot stopper. But if I'm Mateta and I'm struggling, and I'm Crystal Palace, I'm going to be peppering West Ham's goal. I'm going to be going at our defence.
There is no doubt about it. You know, I think this is the other side of it, is that Palace, we've always known what we're capable of doing at our best, but it's about having that consistency of performance. The one thing I would say about us now under Oliver Glasner is we know how we're going to set up. Everyone knows how we're going to set up. We're going to play a back five. We're going to have two in the midfield. We'll have two wide tens, and we'll have a man up top. Everyone knows that. But stopping it is a very different thing.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely thing as a fan when you know your team are going to go and play a certain way, and you also know that your manager isn't going to accept taking your foot off the gas. We may not win, and it would be very Palace to go 16 games unbeaten and then lose to yourselves. That's just, you know, the way it is, and it would be very West Ham for you to break that run. But overall, across a 38-game season or across a 12-month period, I'm very happy with where we are, and I completely understand why. I mean, for me as well, I know I'm going on a bit here, but Graham Potter for me never felt like a West Ham manager, because you want to be entertained. I go back to it all the time. The West Ham sort of era that I grew up with, the Paolo Di Canios and the Freddie Canutes and the Joe Coles, they were entertainers. Trevor Sinclair, players like that. There is that sense that they want to be entertained at West Ham. They don't necessarily expect to win every week, but they want to see things done with a flourish. So if you're not doing that and you're losing, You're not going to be onto a winner at all. And I feel like that's something that you're probably struggling with Potter, because it's very functional, isn't it?
Yeah, well, 100%, mate. And it looks like, when we concede, we capitulate because we look like we've gave up. That's the problem, and that's the biggest concern. We don't really seem to have that fight in the squad. I know it's early days. I know it is, but it's been boiling over as a West Ham fan for years, and it's too consistent now that this is not West Ham fans moaning because we've lost the game. This is not West Ham fans moaning because we've conceded 5 goals at home against Chelsea. This is West Ham moaning for years and years and years of what feels like an element of football abuse. It's we just can't take it anymore. And I think there are some fans that you do talk about saying be careful what you wish for, but promises can very rarely, I suppose, be kept in the world of business and football. But when you lose your home for reasons because we're going to push on and progress, and then we tried, the comments we get from the board are we tried. And then, I don't know if you've seen it, but yesterday we got out a response from the board from the initial letter that was sent to them with the vote of no confidence, and the reply from the board was just that we understand we've made mistakes. However, we've done this right, and just adding fuel to the fire of West Ham fans, which is really not helping the situation
today,
come on to Saturday.
Southern Village stuff come out as well, which is muddled, because on one hand you're like, we're sticking with the project, but you're not. Like, yeah, that's the point. I say this all the time about football fans. You don't necessarily need to see wins. You need to see the direction of travel being one that you can get behind. Portsmouth fans had the FA Cup and European football under Eric Redknapp. They had Jermaine Defoe and Peter Crouch, Cruncher, all these players, and it was great, right? But when they got promoted out of League One with John Mousinho, they were as happy because they could see the direction of travel. So it's not about where you are in a league. It's not about the size of your stadium. It's not about how big the wages that you're paying players are. It's about how you feel the club is moving. And the way West Ham are moving at the moment, the fans are going one way, players are going another way, ownership's going another way, ticket prices are going this way. There's no joined up thinking. And that's what a football club is when it's working well, basically. That's the way I see it. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, Dan, before you go, mate, I really appreciate you coming on, but I just kind of want you to, if you can, give your kind of opinion looking outside in on West Ham right now, so everyone who's watching gets the vibe of where you are at. There's a lot of people in the chat saying they really appreciate your opinion, and the footballing world kind of does, and the way the footballing world is going right now, it's great because they're really appreciating the work that we all do as social media channels and things like that. But what is your kind of opinion on it all from an outsider looking in? And then finally, I'll ask for your predictions.
Well, I think, as I said it at the beginning, I reiterate a sort of similar point, really. I have genuine sympathy because, for me, I look at the situation with the stadium, and there could have been things done to make that a more homely place for you, to smooth the transition. That hasn't happened. You've got an ownership that quite clearly don't care about your fan base in the way that they should. I know about the long running battle to keep the concession price in, and I feel like often social media is a place where point scoring takes precedence over logic, and West Ham fans, partly through their own fault, I guess, because the whole West Ham a massive thing, we all know it's tongue in cheek, but it does rub certain people out the wrong way, because people of top 6 clubs will be like, no, you're not. And you're like, we know that's the gallows humour. But if you take all of that away, you take all of the sort of back and forth away, and you just look at the situation, I try to put myself in the shoes of a West Ham fan. I can't see a way out of the long-term drip of sadness that you are going through. It's not like it's a managerial appointment or a change of board, because the stadium is the stadium. So you need something that is going to kickstart that. And whether it's David Sullivan selling up, whether it's Graham Potter leaving, whether it's a mixture of things, something seismic needs to happen. And if it doesn't, you will continue to have my sympathy, because you've got generations of West Ham fans that feel genuinely displaced and ignored. And that isn't the way a football club should be. In relation to a preview, it sounds like a proper cop-out. I refuse to come onto these things and ever predict for us to lose. I also fail to predict a win as well, because it just feels like it's sort of not what Palace fans can expect at any point. And maybe that'll change if we go and win the UEFA Conference or something. But I'll probably say a 1-1 draw. I would imagine, I don't know, you go in front early and then we get one back late. I could see that happening. I can't assume that we're going to go to West Ham and win personally.
And it's funny because you've played 4 games this season and you're unbeaten. However, you've drew 3-1-1, but a win at West Ham puts you into 1-2, drew 3, and that it's funny because if you lose the game at West Ham, it could kind of there's a bit like what's going on. But if you win the game at West Ham, it's a very good start to the season. It's such a like 50-50 situation.
And we beat Villa 3-0. Right?
Yeah,
we had more chances against Sunderland and drew 0-0. But no one cares about that because it's just the scoreline, and it gives it that gloss. So in general, I mean, I'm preoccupied at the moment with Europe anyway. Like going to Eastern Poland, and you've got Russian drones flying over the ground that we're going to, and it's obviously a first trip for us away. So that's at the start of October. I'm not suggesting that Premier League football's a distraction. Obviously, it's the bread and butter, but given how well we've started, it gives you that solid platform to not worry too much about a potential relegation battle and just sort of enjoy it for the ride that it is. And as I said earlier in relation to Oliver Glasner with the contract and everything else, I think we just have to do that and try and live in the moment and enjoy it. As I dare say, many West Ham fans probably wish they'd done a bit more when you were on the way to that UEFA Conference victory a couple of years back.
Well, enjoy it, mate, because it was the best time of my life as a West Ham fan. I'm not going to lie, and it was the same for many West Ham fans, but it feels like a little bit of a distant memory. That's why I think every West Ham fan purchased any form of merchandise that existed in relation to that Europa. The whole 3 years, to be honest, journey was fantastic. But yeah, Dan, mate, thank you so much. Anyone who doesn't know, which you should know, HLTCO podcast is available. You can go and check out yourself on X as well, which is where I kind of came across you many years ago. So yeah, go and check out all the great content. Dan, I'll get you out and I'll just finish off up on this stream. But thanks for it again, mate. I really appreciate your time.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers for that, mate. Take care. Bye-bye. Well, everyone, there you go. What a fantastic guest. I mean, no point in me coming on talking about the opposition teams when it comes to them. And I know myself and Russ and Holly have been trying to bring you opposition views, but really appreciate that. And it's such a tough time as a West Ham fan right now, and I'm taking time to compute that statement that West Ham released yesterday. I'll come back to you on that. I'm not going to do that right now. So thanks for watching. If you are new around here, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up. Please leave a comment. If you're watching on X, head across to our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, please, because we do, in my opinion, really good content, a varied amount of content. You might not look like every show, but you should like some. It's not for everyone, but some of it is. We've got ex-players come on, really good opposition views, opinions, transfer news, you name it, all the same stuff that's going around with all the kind of YouTube channels and social media accounts. So make sure you do go and check them out as per usual. Join Russ for the Hammers headlines later on with a bit of exclusive news coming to the West Ham Network. Not that we like to be an ITK, but we do have an exclusive coming your way. Join us later on. Take it easy and come on, you Irons.